This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the elephant in the room, the elephant being a Two Rock Classic reverb signature. Here's the thing, people say that Two Rock amplifiers, or I think certainly the perception is that these are very expensive bits of kit. I wanted to sort of ask the question, are these too expensive? So in this video, I kind of dialed in a tone that I was quite liking on the Two Rock Classic reverb signature, which I was borrowing off of Jake at the time. And I was also borrowing his Fender Pro Reverb 68, which is a £1,500 amplifier. And this is a £5,650 amplifier if you bought it new today. Like a lot of money, right? And I put them both through the same cabinet and kind of wanted to see if I could get them sounding close to one another. So let me know your thoughts on whether these things sound close or not. So this is of course one setting. I also tried testing it with a pedal up front to see if that made a big difference, and here's how they took those pedals. So what I took from that specific comparison is that on those settings, I found them to be pretty comparable. Now the Fender is a PCB amplifier. Part of the reason that Two Rocks are so expensive is because they're hand wired, and I also wanted to kind of look online and see what else you can get for this sort of money. So Fender actually are relatively competitive in this area, if you can imagine such a thing. They are £2,700 in the UK for a hand-wired deluxe reverb, the 64. You look at things like the Mesa Boogie Badlander, which is a PCB-based amp in the UK, that's about £3,000. A Sir Bella in the UK is actually hand-wired and costs £2,600. I think that's a little bit of a sneaky good deal in this sort of area. If you look, part of the reason I think, again, this specific Two Rock kind of looks expensive is because it kind of is a single channel thing, like a pedal platform. You could find something like a Friedman BE Deluxe B100. They're about 4,000. A Soldano SLO, those are about 4,000. So researching this kind of just made me think, well, actually, this kind of amp thing has got a bit out of control. So what could you do if you wanted this sort of thing but didn't want to spend that amount of money? I think basically there's a big percentage of the tone which is kind of that 60s era Fender, and I guess to point you in the direction of that, players like John Mayer, Robin Ford, etc., that have been seen with Two Rocks and with, of course, Dumbles, have also been seen playing the Fender stuff a lot as well as Eric Johnson, who incidentally has a course on TrueFire where he goes through some of his rig, and he has a classic reverb signature in his rig, and he shows all the settings on that and the rest of his rig. You can use the code JNC40 to get 40% off of that course, or JNC100 to get 100% off of their all-access pass, if you wanted to do that. But Eric Johnson has been a guy that's also gigged with just deluxe reverbs on clinic tours and stuff. So I think if you're being kind of brutal about it, you could say, well, a Fender will get you quite a lot of the way there, and I don't think you'd be necessarily wrong. It's a bit like the luxury watch market in a way, where there's something going on with this Two Rock stuff where it's like a lot of prestige tied up into the name Two Rock. A Cherrytone amp will be about half the price, also part of that Dumble heritage, although I'm not sure they're generally built off schematics rather than actual Dumbles, right? Then there's this Amplified Nation, which is maybe like $1,000 or so cheaper, but it does seem that even PCB amplifiers these days in the UK, if they're one of the kind of posh brands, are at least sort of $3,000, except for the Sir Bella and maybe the Fender handwired stuff. So is it expensive? Yes. What I noticed really is the reverb sounds great. I also looked at actually matchless DC30s. Those are about $5,000 as well once you add a reverb in. So everything is crazy expensive. In terms of justifying these sorts of things, I was reading a thing today, and Keith Urban and John Mayer had a conversation. John Mayer was trying to sell Keith Urban one of his Dumble amplifiers, and Keith said that's a lot of money. And I think the conversation went something like, yeah, but you plug all of your guitars into it. And I think Keith Urban was already someone who'd spent loads of money on vintage kind of guitars, getting into the vintage gear game. And he found that a convincing enough argument to buy one. I think Keith Urban has loads of Dumbles. But maybe that's part of the thinking with this stuff. If you spend lots of money on guitars, you feel like, well, spending a lot of money on an amp naturally makes sense as well. But I do think £5,650 is asking a lot for essentially a single channel amplifier, right? And I don't think there's necessarily a super secret sauce to the thing at all. As I said, I think you can basically get somewhere pretty close with Fender style cleans. And the main thing, I've got like a vintage Pro Reverb behind here, is that the sweet spot of a Fender is comparatively quite narrow, whereas with the classic Reverb Signature, because you've got such a wide sweep of gain and master volume, you can basically have it sounding however you like with however much cleanness you want. So it can be way cleaner, way louder than the Fender equivalent. And I guess that's the sort of thing that you'd miss on a deluxe reverb or a Princeton or even a Pro Reverb, because the Pro Reverb, once you get past like 3 or 4, starts to break up. The 2-Rock doesn't really want to break up at all. It's sort of like that missus that always hangs on. Let me know your thoughts. Are 2-Rocks too expensive? Too bougie? Is it a lot of lawyers buying these things? I think, yeah, it was all, if you do the math on it as well, like the amount of gigs you'd have to be doing to actually cover the cost of one of these things. I don't think it's predominantly professional guitarists that are buying them, probably.